Every 36 seconds, a child enters the American orphanage system. Every hour, 100 dreams are put on hold. Every day, thousands of talents are wasted simply due to lack of opportunity. Steph Curry was about to discover that he had the power to change these numbers forever. You can perceive that some of the greatest transformations begin exactly when we stop accepting statistics as immutable destinies. And it was on a common October day that Steph discovered that numbers are not just numbers. They are real lives waiting for a chance. It was a typical Tuesday in October in San Francisco. Steph had just finished another intense training session, sweat still dripping from his forehead, when his phone vibrated with an urgency that cut through the silence of the locker room. On the other end of the line, Robert Kim, social projects manager at the Curry Foundation, spoke with a tension in his voice that Steph had rarely heard. "Steph, you need to see this," said Robert, and there was something in his tone that made his heart race. "I just received a desperate call from Oakland. There's a place that will move you in a way I can't explain." In that moment, Steph had no idea that this call would change not only his life, but the lives of thousands of children around the world. Sometimes, the most important moments arrive disguised as simple coincidences. Robert explained that he had received a contact from Jennifer Walsh, a social worker who had been working in Oakland for more than 15 years. She had discovered that a historic orphanage from 1952 was about to be demolished by the city hall. The place had a rich history. Over the decades, more than 3,000 children had called that place home. But now, after a devastating fire that destroyed 80% of the structure, only ruins and a demolition order remained. "Steph," continued Robert, "you know we've already visited dozens of social projects, but when Jennifer showed me the photos of this place, something touched me deeply. It's as if each brick carried the story of a child who passed through there." While Robert spoke, Steph felt a familiar restlessness growing in his chest. Despite being at the peak of his career, with titles, records, and worldwide recognition, there was a persistent feeling that something was missing, as if all the glory of the courts was just the prelude to something greater, something that was still waiting to be discovered. Isn't it incredible how life has a peculiar way of guiding us exactly to where we need to be? Steph decided to visit the location that same afternoon. When he arrived at the address in Oakland, accompanied by Robert, the first thing that struck him was the brutal contrast. On one side, modern and well-maintained buildings. On the other, a structure that seemed to have been forgotten by time and society. The home of Hope Orphanage stood like a ghost from the past. Charred walls, broken windows, and an atmosphere that carried decades of interrupted stories. Jennifer Walsh waited for them at the entrance, and you can perceive that there are people who carry the mission of their lives stamped in their gaze. She was in her early 50s, with gray hair and hands that trembled slightly when she spoke about the children she had tried to help over the years. "Steph," she said, gripping his hands with surprising strength, "thank you for coming. I know you have 1,000 more important things to do, but this place needs someone who understands what it means to give hope to those who have nothing left." How many times in life do we encounter moments that define who we really are? When Steph crossed the main entrance, his steps echoed through what remained of the main hall. The smell of burnt wood still permeated the air, mixed with something he couldn't identify. Perhaps it was the essence of interrupted dreams. While Jennifer guided Steph and Robert through the damaged corridors, telling stories of children who had grown up there, they reached a partially preserved room on the second floor. The wooden door was warped, but still functional. When Steph opened it, What he saw inside changed everything. But then something happened that no one expected. The room had been protected from the fire by a structural coincidence. A beam had fallen in such a way as to deflect the flames. And there, on the walls, were hundreds of drawings made by children over the years. Some faded by time, others still vibrant, all telling small stories of hope, fear, dreams, and determination. Steph walked slowly through the room, examining each drawing as if they were sacred relics. There were drawings of families, of houses with gardens, of children playing, of superheroes, of animals. And then, in a specific corner of the wall, his eyes found something that made his heart stop for an instant. It was a drawing of a boy playing basketball. The stroke was simple, clearly made by a small child, but there was an energy in the figure that jumped off the paper. And underneath, written with the uncertain handwriting of someone who was still learning to form letters, was a phrase that cut through Steph like lightning. Dreams don't die. Great things happen when no one is looking. And in that moment, alone in that room full of memories, Steph felt something transform inside him. It wasn't just inspiration. It was a calling, a mission that seemed to have been waiting for him his entire life. Jennifer noticed the change in Steph's expression. "That drawing was made by Tyler Brooks," she said softly. "He was 8 years old when he arrived here, came from a family that, well, that couldn't take care of him. Tyler always said he was going to be a basketball player when he grew up. He stayed here for 3 years before being adopted by a family in Sacramento." "Where is he now?" asked Steph, unable to take his eyes off the drawing. "He's 17 years old. He's finishing high school. He's a brilliant kid, but—" Jennifer paused, like someone carrying a weight. "The family that adopted him does what they can, but they don't have the resources to give him all the opportunities he deserves. Tyler has an incredible talent for technology, but he's never had access to the equipment or courses that could develop it. What would you do if you discovered that you have the power to transform not just one life, but hundreds of lives?" Steph remained silent for long minutes, absorbing everything he had seen and heard. Robert and Jennifer respected his moment, understanding that something profound was happening. When Steph finally spoke, his voice carried a determination that surprised even himself. "I want to buy this place, not to demolish it, not to rebuild it the same way, but to create something that has never existed before. Great things happen when no one is looking." And in that moment, in the ruins of a forgotten orphanage, an idea was born that would change the way the world sees the potential of children in vulnerable situations. Robert and Jennifer looked at each other, realizing they were not just witnessing a decision. They were witnessing the birth of a revolution. Have you ever wondered what separates a dream from reality? Sometimes it's just the courage to take the first step, even when we don't know exactly where it will take us. Steph took a picture of Tyler Brooks's drawing, but not with his cell phone. He engraved that image in his memory, along with the sense of purpose that now pulsed in his veins like pure adrenaline. He knew he had found his true mission. Leaving that room, Steph was no longer just a basketball star looking for his next social project. He had become the architect of a vision that transcended sports, fame, or recognition. A vision that began with the simple conviction that every dream deserves a chance to become reality. And so ends the first chapter of a journey that would prove that sometimes the most destroyed places are exactly where the most beautiful stories are born. Great things happen when no one is looking. And what Steph was about to build would make headlines around the world. But what Steph had in mind went far beyond simply rebuilding a common orphanage. In fact, what he was about to propose would challenge everything people understood about childcare and talent development. 3 days after the visit to the ruins, Steph convened a meeting at his house that would change everything. On the dining room table, dozens of papers were spread out: architectural plans, educational research, and reports about orphanages around the world. The air was charged with the energy of someone who had just discovered their true calling. Robert Kim arrived punctually at 8 in the morning, accompanied by Carlos Mendez, an architect specializing in social projects, and Sarah Mitchell, a child psychologist who had worked with Steph on previous projects. Everyone expected to discuss a traditional renovation, perhaps some modern improvements. None of them were prepared for what Steph was about to reveal. "Folks," began Steph, and there was an intensity in his voice that commanded attention. "Forget everything you know about orphanages. Forget the idea of just providing shelter and food. What I want to create will be the world's first comprehensive development center. You can perceive that there are moments in life when a simple idea transforms into something revolutionary." Steph began to draw on a blank sheet, his hands moving with the precision of someone who visualizes every detail of an impossible dream. "Imagine a miniature city," he continued, "where each child not only survives, but discovers and develops their unique talents. I'm not talking about a shelter with some extra activities. I'm talking about state-of-the-art technology laboratories, professional music studios, Olympic sports courts, community gardens where children learn sustainability, and even a mini startup incubator for teenagers." The silence in the room was deafening. Carlos Mendez was the first to speak, his voice loaded with incredulity. "Steph, this is too ambitious. You're talking about at least $15 million, maybe more." "Exactly," replied Steph, and there was something in his smile that mixed determination with a hint of visionary madness. "Because big problems require big solutions. You can't solve the American orphanage crisis with patches and good intentions." Sarah Mitchell leaned forward, examining the sketches. "Steph, where does this vision come from? What made you think of something so radical?" It's impossible not to feel that some answers carry decades of repressed emotions. Steph paused, took a deep breath, and for the first time since he had begun talking about the project, his voice lost its business firmness and gained the texture of something deeply personal. "You know, my father played in the NBA," he said, "but what they don't talk much about is how difficult it was for him to balance his career with family. I grew up watching him struggle to be present, to be more than just a provider. And even with all the resources we had, sometimes I felt lost. Imagine a child who doesn't even have that. Great things happen when no one is looking." And in that moment, Steph was sharing the deepest origin of his mission. He told how, at 12 years old, he had visited an orphanage in Charlotte with his father. He vividly remembered a boy his age who had an extraordinary talent for drawing, but had never had access to decent materials or art classes. "That boy could have been the next Picasso," said Steph, "but he never had the chance to discover that. How many Tyler Brooks exist out there, carrying talents that the world will never know? Isn't it incredible how a question can contain the seed of a revolution?" Robert, Carlos, and Sarah began to understand that they were not just discussing a project. They were witnessing the birth of a movement. But then something happened that would test Steph's determination in ways he had never imagined. In the following weeks, as the team began to transform the vision into concrete plans, obstacles arose like waves in a perfect storm. The initial budget of $5 million exploded to $15 million, when engineers discovered that the damaged structure needed to be completely rebuilt. The Q. Technology laboratories alone would cost $2 million. The local community divided brutally. On one side, families like Lisa Rodriguez's, who worked as a nurse at the local hospital, saw the project as a golden opportunity to revitalize the neighborhood. On the other, residents like Anthony Zhang, owner of a small construction company, feared that the influx of problem children would affect their property values. "I have nothing against charity," Anthony would say in community meetings, "but why bring all these problems to our quiet neighborhood? What would you do if you discovered that doing good also brings unexpected resistance?" Steph participated in more than 20 community meetings, each one an emotional battlefield where dreams and fears confronted each other without truce. But the hardest blow came from City Hall. Diana Thompson, head of the Municipal Licensing Department, presented a list of bureaucratic requirements that seemed designed to discourage the project. Environmental impact studies, traffic reports, zoning adaptations, approvals from at least 7 different departments. "Mr. Curry," said Diana during a particularly tense meeting, "we understand your good intentions, but a project of this magnitude requires extraordinary care. We're talking about 2 years of approval process, at minimum." 2 years. The words echoed in Steph's mind like a hammer. How many children would enter the system in that time? How many talents would be wasted while he navigated infinite bureaucracy? Great things happen when no one is looking. And it was on a lonely night, alone in his office, that Steph made the decision that would define the rest of his life. Have you ever wondered what the price of a worthwhile dream is? Steph picked up the phone and called his accountant. "Matthew," he said, "I want you to calculate how much of my personal fortune I can invest in this project. Every available cent." Matthew Brown, who had been managing Steph's finances for more than a decade, almost choked. "Steph, you're talking about wiping out practically half of your liquid assets. What if it doesn't work?" Steph's answer was simple, loaded with the certainty of someone who had finally found their purpose. "Matthew, what if it does work?" Naturally, this leads us to a powerful truth about real change. It never happens within the comfort zone. It requires us to bet everything on what we believe, even when we have no guarantees. Steph would not only maintain the project, he would do something no one expected, something that would transform his personal vision into a global movement that would make headlines around the world. And it was in this moment of maximum pressure that Steph discovered that great things happen when no one is looking, especially when the person who is looking decides to bet everything on the possibility of change. What happened in the following months defied all expectations and proved that sometimes, when we bet everything on a vision, the universe conspires to make it reality in ways we never imagined. Steph not only maintained the project with his personal fortune, he did something that left the sports world completely shocked. In a press conference that initially would be about basketball, Steph announced that he was inviting the biggest NBA stars to join what he called the most important mission of our lives. "Folks," said Steph to an audience of confused sports journalists, "you came here expecting to talk about three-point shots, but I want to talk about something much more important. I want to talk about how we're going to change the future of thousands of children. You can perceive that there's a difference between talking about making a difference and actually putting everything at risk to make it happen." In 1 week, Steph had personally called LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, and 17 more stars of the league. Not to ask for money, but to ask for something much more valuable: time, talent, and direct mentorship. The response was absolutely surprising, LeBron was the first to accept, followed by Kevin Durant, then Giannis Antetokounmpo. In 2 weeks, 23 of the biggest names in world basketball had committed to becoming permanent mentors of the project. But it wasn't just about basketball. Each star chose a specific talent to develop in the children. LeBron took on the Youth Entrepreneurship Program. Kevin Durant created a music production laboratory. Chris Paul developed a leadership and communication course. James Wilson, a former player who had become a music producer, set up professional studios where children could record their own music. What's most impressive is how a simple idea can transform into something that transcends all expectations. The project stopped being Steph Curry's orphanage and became the movement that is redefining the future of vulnerable childhood. But then, something happened that no one expected. During the construction phase, something extraordinary was happening in parallel. Tyler Brooks, the 17-year-old boy whose drawing had inspired Steph, was working on a personal project that would change everything. Remember him? The boy who drew Dreams Don't Die and had been adopted by a family in Sacramento? Tyler had discovered Steph's project through the news and, moved by a deep gratitude he could barely express, decided to contribute in the only way he knew how, using his talent for technology. Working 16 hours a day in his room, with a borrowed computer and unstable internet connection, Tyler developed something revolutionary, an application called DreamBridge, a platform that connected orphaned children with adoptive families using artificial intelligence to match personalities, interests, and needs. How many times in life do we witness the exact moment when a dream goes viral? Tyler launched a beta version of the application at the end of March. In 1 week, there were 1,000 downloads. In 1 month, 100,000. In 3 months, DreamBridge had 5 million users in 40 countries. The application didn't just connect families and children. It created a global network where children in orphanages could show their talents through short videos, receive online mentorship from volunteer professionals, and even sell small artistic or technological projects. Have you ever wondered what the moment feels like when a coincidence reveals itself as destiny? When Steph discovered that Tyler Brooks, the boy whose drawing had inspired everything, was the creator of the application that was revolutionizing global adoptions, he understood that he was participating in something much bigger than a social project. It was a revolution. International media began to notice. CNN did a special report. BBC sent a team to document the construction. The project stopped being local Oakland news to become global headlines, but the real impact was revealed when videos started arriving from children around the world. From orphanages in India, Brazil, South Africa, Philippines, hundreds of thousands of children sending videos showing their talents, girls singing, boys programming, children painting, teenagers creating inventions with recycled materials. It's impossible not to feel that the universe has a unique way of amplifying true dreams. In 6 months, the project had inspired the creation of 15 Curry Centers under construction around the world. Entrepreneurs from Brazil, executives from Japan, philanthropists from England, all wanting to replicate the model in their countries. Naturally, this leads us to a powerful discovery about real change. It doesn't happen in isolation. A true transformation creates waves that expand far beyond the point of origin. Steph was in his office when he received a call that would change his perspective forever. It was Patricia Johnson, executive director of UNICEF, with a EE2E proposal he had never imagined possible. "Steph," she said, "we want to formalize a global partnership, transform the Curry Centers into a United Nations pilot program for child talent development. We're talking about an initial investment of $50 million to create 100 centers in the next 5 years. Great things happen when no one is looking, and now the entire world was paying attention. What had begun as the purchase of an orphanage in ruins had become a global movement. That was redefining how humanity cares for its most vulnerable children. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. During the week of finalizing construction of the original center in Oakland, Marcus Williams, now 17 years old, and one of the future residents of the center, made an announcement that would leave even Steph speechless. Tyler Brooks's Dream Bridge application had attracted investors from Silicon Valley. A funding round had raised $50 million, and Tyler, inspired by Steph's example, made a decision that proved that great things happen when no one is looking, especially when these people decide to multiply generosity instead of accumulating wealth. 6 months after the inauguration, the results exceeded even the most optimistic expectations and proved that when we plant seeds of hope in fertile soil, the harvest transcends all predictions. The Oakland Comprehensive Development Center had become much more than a revolutionary orphanage. It was a living laboratory of human transformation where the impossible happened daily. Of the 200 resident children, 89% had developed specific talents they didn't even know they possessed before. Emma Rodriguez, 12 years old, had become the youngest educational game developer in the country, creating a game that taught mathematics through space adventures. Noah Johnson, 15 years old, led a community garden that now supplied 3 local restaurants with organic products. Sophie Martinez, only 9 years old, composed piano symphonies that were being studied by classical music conservatories. You can perceive that the real magic wasn't just in the individual talents, but in the atmosphere of infinite possibilities that had transformed that place. Each corridor echoed with sounds of creation, codes being written, music being composed, prototypes being tested, dreams being built brick by brick. But the greatest transformation was about to be revealed at the 6-month ceremony, an event that would bring together all the people who had made this revolution possible. The day of the ceremony dawned with a clear sky that seemed to have been painted especially for the occasion. Steph arrived early at the center, accompanied by Jennifer Walsh, the social worker who had made the initial call. They walked through the same corridors that 6 months before were just rubble and despair. "Jennifer," said Steph, observing the rooms full of state-of-the-art equipment and, more importantly, full of children concentrated on their projects. "Do you remember when you told me that this place needed someone who understood what it means to give hope?" Jennifer smiled, her eyes welling up with emotion. "I said that, didn't I? But Steph, what you created here goes far beyond hope. You created a new model of how to care for humanity's future. What's most impressive is how celebration moments can transform into moments of even greater revelation. When Tyler Brooks stepped up to the small stage set up in the main auditorium, everyone expected a simple thank you. No one was prepared for the announcement that would change everything once again. "Folks," Tyler began, his voice carrying the maturity of someone who had grown up facing challenges, "you know that the Dream Bridge application raised $50 million in investments. What you don't know is what I decided to do with that money." The silence in the auditorium was total. Even the youngest children seemed to understand that something important was happening. Inspired by Steph Curry's example, who bet his personal fortune on us, I decided to donate 100% of those $50 million to the global expansion of Curry Centers. I don't want to be just the creator of a successful application. I want to be part of the generation that proved that every child in the world deserves the chance to discover their potential. Have you ever wondered what an ovation that comes from the heart. Sounds like? The auditorium exploded in applause that lasted more than 5 minutes. Steph hugged Tyler with tears in his eyes, understanding that he had witnessed something rare. The moment when a cycle of generosity perpetuates itself. But the biggest surprise was still reserved for the end of the ceremony. Marcus Williams, the 17-year-old boy Steph had mentioned in the initial planning, stood up to speak. During these 6 months, Marcus had developed his talent for leadership and communication under Chris Paul's mentorship, and now coordinated the global network of Young Curry Center's ambassadors. "Steph," said Marcus, "there's something you need to see. Something that will show the true impact of what started here." Marcus connected his laptop to the projector and showed an interactive world map. Bright points appeared in dozens of countries: Brazil, Japan, England, South Africa, India, Philippines, France, Germany, Australia. These are the 43 Curry Centers that are being built or already functioning around the world, Marcus explained. But that's not all. Using DreamBridge technology, we created a global network where more than 200,000 children are already receiving online mentorship from volunteer professionals. It's impossible not to feel that some stories grow far beyond what their creators ever imagined. Steph watched that map, seeing points of light spreading across continents, and understood that he had participated in something that transcended social projects or philanthropy. He had helped plant the seeds of a new way for humanity to care for its children. Naturally, this leads us to the most powerful truth of this entire journey. Great things happen when no one is looking. But when these things grow and multiply, the entire world starts paying attention. At the end of the ceremony, Steph walked alone to the room where it had all begun. The drawing room, now transformed into an interactive memorial where visitors could see the project's evolution through augmented reality. But in the center of the wall, protected by special glass, was Tyler Brooks's original drawing. The boy playing basketball, and the phrase that had changed everything. "Dreams don't die." Next to the drawing, a golden plaque with a new phrase: "Dreams don't die." They inspire other dreams, creating an infinite chain of transformation. While Steph observed that drawing, he began to hear a sound that made his heart race. They were voices of children singing, laughing, talking animatedly. He left the room and followed the sound to the main courtyard. There were hundreds of children of all ages, some residents of the center, others visitors from other projects, all playing together in a space that 6 months before was just rubble. When they saw Steph, they began to applaud spontaneously, not because he was a basketball celebrity, but because they understood that he had bet everything on the possibility of their dreams becoming reality. How many times in life do we witness the exact moment when a dream becomes legacy? Steph was being ovated by hundreds of children in a place that had become the epicenter of a global revolution. The sound of applause echoed through walls that now housed not just children, but future scientists, artists, entrepreneurs, leaders. And it was in that moment that Steph understood the final truth of his journey. He hadn't just bought an orphanage in ruins. He had discovered that great things happen when no one is looking, especially when we decide that every child in the world deserves to be seen, heard, and have their dreams taken seriously. The legacy that transcends generations is not in the buildings constructed or the millions invested. It's in the moment when a child discovers that their dreams really don't die. They were just waiting for someone who believed in them as much as they did. And this is the story of how Steph Curry bought an orphanage in ruins and built something that is making headlines around the world. Proof that humanity's future is safe in the hands of those who still believe that great things happen when no one is looking.